My name is Riley, and I'm in my late 40s. I've spent most of my life trying to be everything to everyone except for myself. For over 20 years, I've been married to Robert, a man I thought I knew inside and out. Together, we raised two wonderful children, Emma and Jack, who are now in their early 20s. They're carving their own paths in the world, and as proud as I am of them, sometimes I feel like I'm fading into the background, a mere afterthought in the hustle and bustle of life around me. I've always been the type of person to put others first, and it's a role I've accepted without question. I'm a high school teacher, teaching English to teenagers who are often too preoccupied with their own lives to notice the quiet dedication I pour into each lesson. My job is fulfilling in its own way, but it's a job that rarely garners much recognition. I love my students, but sometimes I wonder if anyone truly sees the hard work I put in, or if they even care. My paycheck is modest, barely enough to cover the bills, and the savings I have set aside for retirement are paltry at best. I tell myself that's enough, that I don't need anything more, but deep down, I know I long for something different. The life I lead feels like it's on autopilot routine, predictable, and never truly mine to control. I wake up every morning to the sound of Robert's alarm, make breakfast, prepare lunches, and see him off to his work, which is always more important than mine. We've lived in the same house for years, but it no longer feels like home. I've fallen into this comfortable, if not suffocating, rhythm where I play the role of the dutiful wife, the nurturing mother, but nothing more. It's as if my existence is solely defined by my roles in other people's lives, and I have long lost sight of who I am outside of them. I try my best to meet the expectations set for me, but it's never enough. Robert has always been the more successful one in the family, and no matter how much I've contributed or sacrificed, it's always been his career, his achievements, that have taken center stage in the circles we socialize in. His promotions, his business deals, his power, these are the things that matter, while I stand on the sidelines, applauding him, cheering for him. I've become invisible. Friends and family don't talk to me the same way they talk to him. He's the one with the status, the connections, the wealth. Me, I'm just the woman who makes sure everything runs smoothly at home, that the kids are fed, and the house is kept in order. My family loves me, or at least they say they do, but I often feel like I'm living in their shadows. They admire Robert's accomplishments, the house we live in, the car he drives, and the vacations we take. I can hear the unspoken comparisons when they speak about other people's success stories, how they marvel at the extravagant lives of our friends. I am constantly being measured against those standards I'll never reach. My contribution to the family is often taken for granted, and the weight of it is exhausting. Sometimes, I can't help but wonder if this is all I'm meant to be, just a wife, a mother, someone who fades into the background while everyone else thrives. It's as if I am defined by the roles I play, not by who I truly am. I've spent so many years in the shadow of Robert's ambition, nurturing everyone around me, that I've lost sight of the woman I used to be. But as I lie awake at night, a part of me wonders if there's more to me than this. Am I destined to live in the background forever? Or is there something more I'm supposed to do with my life? It was supposed to be a day of celebration, a day to witness my brother's happiness as he married the woman of his dreams. I had prepared for this wedding for months, helping with the arrangements, coordinating the guest list, picking out the flowers, and even stepping in as a makeshift bridesmaid when the original one had to cancel last minute. My brother, Chris, was the first in the family to get married, and it felt like a monumental moment. Everyone was so excited for him. I, on the other hand, had my own quiet turmoil simmering beneath the surface, but I didn't think anything could prepare me for what happened that day. The wedding took place at a lavish estate in the hills, one of those places you see in magazines, where the entire venue costs upwards of $50 just to rent for the day. Guests were greeted by an extravagant setup and open bar serving vintage wines, hors d'oeuvres that could feed an army. and a band that played jazz standards as the sun set over the rolling hills. It was a wedding fit for royalty, and everyone in attendance had come to see the picture-perfect union of my brother and his beautiful bride, Candace. But somewhere between the first toast and the second, I felt a shift. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was as if the attention I thought I was supposed to have in this moment, the proud, supportive sister, was suddenly yanked away. It started with something small. As the ceremony proceeded, I noticed that I had been seated at the far end of the reception hall, next to the caterers and the band members, while the main guest family, close friends, were seated up front in the prominent seats. It was a subtle move, but enough to make my chest tighten. My place had been moved, or worse, had it ever really existed in the first place. The moment that truly broke me came during the wedding reception. The speeches had just begun, and my brother, in his typical laid-back fashion, raised his glass to toast his bride. "To Candace," he said, his voice warm and full of love. "The woman who makes everything better just by being in my life." The guests clinked their glasses, and I smiled politely, but there was an unsettling feeling gnawing at me. Then, Candace stood up, as if her speech had been planned meticulously. She thanked my parents for raising Chris, and then she addressed the room with a dazzling smile. But when she turned to me, the smile faltered. Her eyes flicked to my face, and I could see the judgment there, sharp and cold. "I'd also like to thank Riley for all her hard work in helping us plan this wedding," she said, her tone oddly condescending. "Though, I must admit, I didn't quite expect to see you here in this role, given, well, the way things have been in your family." I felt a flush spread across my cheeks, and for a moment, the room seemed to spin. What did she mean by that? The subtle jab cut deeper than I could have ever imagined, as if my mere presence at the wedding, doing my part to help, was a burden. I wasn't part of the family in the way she expected, not wealthy enough, not glamorous enough. My humble contributions, my attempts to be supportive, were nothing more than a token effort in her eyes. I froze, fighting back tears, and my brother looked at me with confusion, but he didn't speak up. He didn't defend me. In fact, he avoided eye contact altogether. The moment passed, and the speech continued, but all I could hear was the deafening silence in my mind, echoing with the weight of Candace's words. The sting of her casual cruelty lingered. But the evening didn't end there. As the night wore on and the party began to thin, I learned something else, something that hit me harder than any public insult could. Robert, my husband, had been acting strangely since we arrived at the wedding. He had barely said a word to me, kept to himself, and when I tried to engage him, he only responded with short, dismissive answers. As the night wore on, I found him talking quietly with Candace's father, a man who had made his fortune in real estate. When Robert saw me approaching, his eyes widened, and he quickly stood up, excusing himself. But it wasn't the sudden awkwardness that caught my attention. It was the numbers. I overheard enough to understand what was going on. Robert and Candace's father had been discussing property real estate investments. Specifically, a series of high-end properties they were planning to sell. One of those properties, our home, was on the list. The value a staggering $3.5 million. I felt my knees buckle beneath me. Our dream home. The one Robert and I had worked so hard for, the one we'd raised our children in, was about to be sold. At that moment, I felt a wave of betrayal so intense I could barely breathe. Robert, my husband, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, was planning to sell our home to line his pockets. Just as he was preparing to leave me, the words hit me like a hammer. He was doing this with Linda, the woman who was everything I could never be. She had money, connections, status, and now, Robert, too, was drawn into that world, and I was being left behind. I tried to make sense of it. My entire life had been wrapped up in supporting Robert, making sacrifices for our family. Yet here I was, watching everything I had worked for slip through my fingers like sand. Our savings were barely enough to keep us afloat, and I had only $40,000 saved up in my retirement account. I had worked tirelessly for years to build a life, and in a matter of hours, I realized how insignificant it all seemed. Why wasn't I enough? Why wasn't my love, my devotion, my loyalty ever enough? Was I always destined to be someone else's afterthought? Just another face in the crowd. The night ended with me standing alone, clutching my purse, staring at the empty parking lot, watching as Robert and Candace drove away, their new life ahead of them while I was left to pick up the pieces. The drive back home that evening was a blur. The night had been a whirlwind of emotions, humiliation, disbelief, anger, and yet all I could feel was a heavy silence surrounding me. Robert and I didn't speak a word to each other as we drove back to the house, which now felt like a prison rather than the place we had built our lives together. My heart was racing, and my mind was screaming for answers I knew I would never get. How could I have been so blind? How could I have spent all these years loving someone who never truly valued me? I thought of all the sacrifices I had made, all the moments I had set aside my own dreams and ambitions for the sake of our family. I thought about all the nights I had stayed awake, wondering if Robert was happy, if he needed anything more from me. And now, after everything, I was just discarded. When we finally arrived home, I couldn't bear to face him. The house, once filled with love and laughter, now felt hollow. Robert opened the door and stepped inside, as if nothing had changed, but I couldn't follow him. I stood in the doorway, staring at the place that had once been my sanctuary, my safe space, now tainted by the weight of betrayal. It was almost like a switch had flipped inside me. As I stood there, I realized that I didn't have the strength to continue living in this lie. I couldn't pretend anymore that everything was fine, that I was fine. So, I did the only thing I could think of in that moment. I left. I grabbed my bag and walked out of the house, feeling the cool night air hit my face like a slap. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away, to put as much distance as I could between myself and the man who had shattered everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty. I needed to breathe. I needed to clear my head. I didn't go far, just to the local park, the one where Robert and I had walked hand in hand many years ago. Before life had gotten in the way, I sat down on a bench and let the tears fall freely, my shoulders shaking with the weight of it all. I didn't care anymore. I didn't care if anyone saw me. It was as if every tear was a release from the years of pent-up frustration and hurt I had never let myself express. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't have to hide my pain. But even as I cried, I couldn't help but wonder, how did I get here? How had I allowed myself to become so small, so insignificant in my own life? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about Robert and Linda. This wasn't just about betrayal and rejection. It was about the way I had allowed myself to be treated for years. It was about how I had always put everyone else first and never questioned whether I was getting the respect, the love, the value I deserved in return. I thought about the countless times I had been overlooked in favor of Robert's career, the times I had been silenced in family conversations, the times I had been expected to play the role of the perfect wife and mother without a second thought for my own needs. I remembered the years I spent holding it all together, smiling through the pain, pretending that everything was fine when it never truly was. And now, the culmination of all those years of sacrifice and silence was staring me in the face, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. As I sat there in the park, a part of me felt a deep sense of failure. How could I have been so blind? I had spent so many years pouring my love, my energy, my life into a marriage that was now falling apart. I had given Robert everything. I had my trust, my heart, my loyalty, and yet, in the end, it was never enough. And what did I have to show for it? A broken home, an empty bank account, and a life that suddenly felt meaningless. But there was also something else simmering beneath the surface: anger. Anger at Robert for his betrayal, anger at Linda for coming into my life and taking away everything I had worked for. And most of all, anger at myself for allowing it to happen, for allowing myself to be treated as less than, for letting myself believe that I wasn't worth more than the scraps I had been given. As the hours passed and the park grew emptier, I started to feel a shift inside me. I had always been the one to put others first, to sacrifice my own happiness for the sake of my family. But in that moment, I realized that I didn't have to do that anymore. I didn't have to keep sacrificing my own worth just to please everyone else. I was tired of being invisible. I was tired of being the background character in my own story. I knew I had to take action. I couldn't stay in this toxic situation any longer. I couldn't let Robert's actions define me. I needed to reclaim my life, my dignity, my sense of self. But where would I go from here? The next morning, I started by taking the first step, cutting off financial support. I wasn't going to give him another penny. I didn't care if he needed help with the mortgage or the bills. I wasn't going to be his safety net anymore. And for the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was like I was taking control of anything in my life. I knew there were still difficult conversations ahead. I had to tell my children about the divorce. I had to face the fallout from my family. But in that moment, as I stared at my reflection in the mirror, I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep living for other people. It was time to start living for me. But as I stood there, a single thought kept repeating in my mind. How did I let myself get this far? And that question haunted me, like a shadow, as I tried to figure out who I was now that everything I had once known had been ripped away. The days following Robert's departure were filled with a strange mixture of numbness and chaos. I moved through life on autopilot, going through the motions for the sake of my children. But inside, I was completely unraveling. I had tried to bury myself in my work, in the mundane routines of everyday life, but nothing seemed to quell the constant ache of betrayal. Robert's absence left an enormous void in the house, one that felt even more suffocating than his presence had been. One Saturday afternoon, while sorting through some old boxes in the attic, I came across a stack of papers tied with a leather string papers I had never seen before. At first, I thought it was just another batch of old tax returns or family mementos. But as I began to untie the string and flip through the papers, I froze. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized my father's handwriting, clear and unmistakable. He had passed away a few years ago, and since then, I had kept everything of his stored in the attic, hoping to preserve some connection to him. But this was something entirely different. It was a letter, and as I read through it, my hands trembling, the words hit me like a ton of bricks. Riley, my dear daughter, I have left something for you. It is my hope that you will see the value in it and use it wisely. Should the time ever come when you need it, the stocks I've invested in over the years have appreciated significantly, and though I have never spoken of them, they have the potential to change your life. The current value of these shares, which are held in a secure account, is approximately $10 million. This is your inheritance, the legacy I leave for you. Use it to secure your future, and never let anyone tell you that you are less than you truly are. My breath caught in my throat. $10 million. My father had left me a fortune, one that had been quietly growing for years. Without my knowledge, how could I have missed this? How could I have been so oblivious to something so significant, something so life-changing? But there it was, in black and white, my inheritance. I couldn't believe it. I felt as though I was holding a lifeline in my hands, the very thing that could pull me out of this pit of despair and reshape my future. The letter went on to explain the details of the stocks, the brokerage account where they were held, and instructions on how to access them. I quickly found the account information, still in the envelope, and my mind began to race. It was a chance to start over. It was a chance to prove to myself, and to everyone around me, that I was more than just a wife, more than just a mother who had been overlooked and undervalued. For the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of hope. But as I sat there, staring at the letter, the weight of what it meant started to settle in. I had spent years allowing myself to be defined by others, by Robert's success, by my role as a mother, by the expectations placed on me. And now, I had the power to change all of that. This money wasn't about Robert. It wasn't about proving anything to him. It was about me, about reclaiming my worth and forging a new path for myself, without needing anyone else's approval. I spent the rest of the afternoon sorting through the details, confirming the value of the stocks, and making sure everything was in order. By the time evening came, I had already begun making plans to sell a portion of the stocks to invest in a business idea I had been nurturing for years. I had always dreamed of starting my own company, but Robert had always discouraged it. He had told me it was too risky, too uncertain. But now, with this newfound financial freedom, I could take that risk on my own terms. The next few days passed in a blur as I began to take control of the situation. I was no longer the woman waiting for validation from Robert. I no longer needed to feel small, to be measured against his success. I had my own chance at greatness now, and I was going to seize it. But just when I thought things couldn't get more surreal, fate threw me yet another curveball. It was the following Sunday, just a week after everything had spiraled out of control. The children and I had gathered in the living room to watch a movie, trying to find some semblance of normalcy amidst the chaos. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find my brother, Chris, standing there with his wife, Candace. They had arrived unannounced, and there was something different in Chris's demeanor. He seemed nervous. The last time I saw him, I was still reeling from the wedding, still digesting the humiliating way Candace had addressed me, but now, his expression was one of urgency, almost as if he had something important to say. "Riley, we need to talk," he said, his voice low and serious. Candace stood beside him, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. I didn't know what to expect, but I felt a twinge of anxiety creeping up my spine. What could they possibly want now? Hadn't they already humiliated me enough? "Come in," I said, stepping aside to let them in. We all sat down in the living room, and Chris began to speak, his voice shaky. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened at the wedding. I should have stood up for you. Riley, I shouldn't have let Candace speak to you the way she did. I should have said something." He looked at Candace, who nodded curtly, as if agreeing to something unsaid. "But there's more to this than just that." My heart pounded in my chest. What was he talking about? I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken words hanging heavy between us. Candace shifted in her seat, avoiding my gaze. "Riley, I need to tell you something," Chris continued, his voice now more urgent. "There's something you don't know, something that's been kept from you, something that affects you directly." My mind raced. "What is it? What do you mean?" Chris hesitated, then looked me directly in the eyes. "It's about the inheritance. The stocks. Our father didn't just leave them to you. He left them to you and to Robert. He believed that you and Robert would both benefit from them. But Robert had no intention of telling you. He was planning to take everything for himself." I felt the ground shift beneath me. The room began to spin, my heart racing as I processed his words. "What are you talking about?" Candace finally spoke, her tone almost apologetic. "Riley, your father. He never trusted Robert with the full truth about the inheritance. He knew Robert would try to manipulate you out of it. That's why he kept it a secret. He wanted you to be the one to make the decisions, not him." I was stunned. All this time, I had been fighting my battles alone, not realizing that Robert had been planning to keep me in the dark. And now, not only did I have the chance to be financially independent, but my father had set it up this way. All along, he wanted me to have the power, the control. As the realization set in, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just a financial gift. It was a message. It was my father's way of telling me that I was enough, that I was worthy of standing on my own 2 feet, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of clarity, of purpose. I didn't need Robert, or anyone else, to validate me. I had the strength to create my own future, and in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do next. "Thank you for telling me," I said, my voice steady, as I looked at Chris and Candace. "But I've already made my decision. This is my chance to stand on my own, and I'm not going to let anyone take that from me." The look on their faces told me everything I needed to know. They understood now. They understood what I had always known deep down, that I was capable, that I was strong, and that I had more value than anyone had ever given me credit for. The day I decided to confront Robert was one that I had imagined countless times in my mind, but nothing could prepare me for the rush of emotions that flooded me when I stood outside our old home. The house that had once symbolized the life we built together now felt like a monument to my own weakness, to years of sacrificing my dreams, my happiness, and my self-worth for a man who never truly appreciated me. The keys to the house felt cold in my hand as I unlocked the door, stepping inside with a sense of finality. The house, though familiar, felt alien to me now. Every corner, every piece of furniture, every room held memories of a life I thought was mine, but it wasn't anymore. Not with Robert's betrayal and the life I had been quietly living behind the scenes. I wasn't that woman anymore. I found him in the kitchen, standing by the counter, looking over some papers. He didn't even turn around when I walked in. And that was all it took for my anger to resurface. This man, my husband of 20 years, who had once been my partner, had turned his back on me without so much as a second glance. "Robert," I said, my voice steady but firm. He turned to face me, his expression guarded, as though he had anticipated this moment but wasn't prepared for it. "Riley," he said, his tone cold and distant, "I didn't expect you to come here. I thought we'd agreed on everything, that we'd move forward with the divorce and—" "No, Robert," I interrupted, my voice unwavering. "You've made it clear what you want, but I'm here to make one thing very clear to you. I am done. I'm done with being the woman who was always waiting for your approval, always sacrificing everything for the sake of our family. I'm done being invisible." His eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "Riley, I don't understand why you're doing this. You can't change anything now. This is how things are. We've moved on. You can't keep clinging to the past." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm despite the rising tide of anger inside me. This was the moment I had been preparing for. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me any longer. "I'm not doing this for you, Robert," I said, my voice low but cutting. "I'm doing this for me. You walked away, but I'm finally walking into my own future, for the first time in years. I'm doing something for myself, and you have no say in it. This is my life now. I'm not waiting for anyone to tell me I'm enough." He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't give him the chance. The years of silence, the years of putting myself last, the years of watching him live the life I had only dreamed of it all, came pouring out in that one moment. "You left me for her, Robert, for Linda, and I don't blame her. She's everything I'm not. She's wealthy. She's powerful. She's everything you wanted. But I've realized something in all of this. I don't need you. I never needed you to tell me I was worthy. I've been living in your shadow for too long, and I'm not doing it anymore." Robert's face hardened as I spoke, but I could see the flicker of guilt in his eyes, the guilt that he tried so hard to bury. But this time, I didn't care about the guilt. I wasn't here to save our marriage. I was here to save myself. "I've spent so many years trying to live up to your expectations," I continued. "I sacrificed my own happiness for you, for this family, for the idea of what we were supposed to be. But I don't owe you anything anymore. I'm not going to keep sacrificing myself for your comfort, for your needs. I'm done." Robert looked away, unable to meet my gaze. He had always been so certain of everything, so confident that he could make the decisions, that he could dictate the terms of our lives. But now, as I stood before him, I realized that I had let him control me for far too long. "I'm not your wife anymore, Robert. I'm not the person I was when we first met, And I'm not going to keep pretending that I don't deserve more than this. I deserve to live my life for me. I deserve to be seen, to be valued, to be something more than just the person who supports everyone else. I'm not your caretaker. I'm not your afterthought. I'm not anyone's afterthought. There was silence between us for a long moment, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I could see him trying to process what I had said, trying to make sense of the new version of me standing before him, but there was no room for negotiation anymore. There was no going back. I've secured my own future now. Robert, I said, my voice steady, I'm not relying on you anymore. I'm not relying on anyone. I have something now that I've never had before, a chance to build my own life. And I'm taking it. I'm going to create something for myself, something that's mine, not something that's tied to you, to us. Robert opened his mouth to speak, but he faltered, unsure of how to respond. For the first time, I saw him at a loss for words. His gaze dropped to the floor, and in that moment, I knew he understood. He understood that I wasn't the same woman who had stood by his side all those years. I wasn't the same woman who had given everything up for the sake of their marriage. I'm not asking for your permission, Robert, I continued, and I'm not looking for your approval. I'm simply telling you that I'm moving on. I'm living my life now, and you're not part of it anymore. He didn't say anything else. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. But for the first time, it felt freeing. I didn't need his permission. I didn't need his validation. I was standing on my own 2 feet, and that was enough. As I turned to leave, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. This was it. This was the moment that would define me. I wasn't going to be the background character in my own life anymore. I wasn't going to let anyone tell me who I was supposed to be or what I was supposed to do. This was my story now, and no one, not even Robert, could take that from me. As I walked out the door, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had already left that part of my life behind. The world was waiting for me. And for the first time, I was ready to take it on. After the confrontation with Robert, my life began to shift in ways I never expected. It wasn't an overnight transformation change, never is, but there was a clarity, a sense of purpose, that I hadn't felt in years. I made the decision to sell the house. Our house, the one that had been a symbol of my past life, the house that had once held so many hopes, dreams, and memories, now only held the weight of regret. With the proceeds from the sale, I did something I had never dared to do before. I invested in myself. I took a deep breath and started the business I had always dreamed of, a small boutique for handmade, artisan products, something that had been a passion of mine long before Robert's ambitions had taken over my life. I had always put it off, telling myself that it wasn't the right time, that I had other responsibilities, that it was too risky, but now, the risk was everything. The first few months were hard. There were doubts, sleepless nights, and moments when I wondered if I had made the right choice. But slowly, the business began to grow, and so did I. I reconnected with old friends, people I had lost touch with when life had become so consumed by family and obligations. I found new hobbies, new passions, and for the first time in ages, I felt alive again. I spent more time on myself, on my own growth, my own well-being, and less time worrying about how I was perceived by others. No longer did I seek approval from Robert, my family, or anyone else. I wasn't waiting for someone to tell me I was good enough. I realized, with startling clarity, that I was already enough. My worth had never been tied to anyone's approval, or to the money we accumulated. It was never about the house or the status. It was always about who I was, who I had become through the choices I made and the love I gave. The more I embraced this new life, the more I understood that my self-worth wasn't something anyone could validate. It wasn't about being married to the right man, or living in the right house, or having the right job. It was about embracing the person I had always been, underneath all the expectations and labels. I had spent so much of my life believing I needed to be something I wasn't, someone else's idea of who I should be. But the truth was, I had always been enough. There were moments when I felt guilty for putting myself first, for stepping out of the role that had defined me for so long, the role of the dutiful wife, the supportive mother, the one who always made sure everyone else came before her. But then I would remember something. If I am not whole, if I am not true to myself, then how can I truly love or support anyone else? The love I gave had always been selfless, but I had forgotten that self-love was just as important. In the quiet moments, I would ask myself, why did it take me so long to see this? Why did I wait for someone else to tell me I was enough? I realized that, in the end, we are the ones who must define our own worth. We can't wait for validation from others because, often, it never comes. And even if it does, it isn't enough. The real validation, the real worth, comes from within. I no longer felt the need to seek permission or approval from anyone. I wasn't living for Robert, or my family, or even my children. I was living for me, and that was enough. I often think about the life I left behind, the life where I thought I had to keep proving myself, keep sacrificing for others. But now, I see that true happiness is found in the freedom to be exactly who we are, without needing anyone to tell us we're doing it right. As I look forward to this new chapter in my life, I find myself thinking about what would happen if more of us chose to live for ourselves, not for others. What if we all embraced our own worth without needing constant approval? What if we could stop worrying about meeting the expectations of those around us and instead focused on fulfilling our own dreams, our own desires? Final internal dialogue. What if we could all learn to live for ourselves, to embrace our own worth without needing approval from anyone? What if true happiness is found in the freedom to be exactly who we are? And so, I leave you with this question. Final question for the reader. When was the last time you chose yourself? How much of your life are you living for others? And how much is truly for you? If you're not living for yourself, then who are you living for?